Hello, everyone. Tonight, we dive into a story that might just resonate with you more than you'd expect. We all know the feeling of being taken for granted, right? But what if the person who takes you for granted is your own daughter? Imagine this: a day that's meant to celebrate you, yet it's filled with the sting of neglect. So, before you settle in for tonight's story, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe only if you truly enjoy what I'm about to share. And don't forget to drop your location and time zone in the comments. I'm always curious to see how far this story reaches. Now, let's set the scene. I'm 67 years old, and the silence in my house has been growing louder ever since Harold passed away 3 years ago. It used to comfort me, just the quiet of an empty home, but now it feels like a reminder of all the things I'll never be able to say again. Mother's Day started like any other Sunday, with the usual emptiness that clung to the walls of my house. I made coffee for one, sat down, and tried not to think too much about how this day would unfold. Oilia, my daughter, had called the night before. Her voice was distant, cold even. "Mum, we're having brunch at David's mum's place tomorrow. You should come, 100 sharp." No warmth, no invitation, just an obligation she was handing me. So, at 100, I arrived at Patricia's house, exactly on time, because that's the way I was raised, to always be on time, never late. The driveway was already filled with expensive cars, and the laughter from the backyard echoed around the block. Patricia David's mother had always been everything I wasn't: polished, poised, and effortlessly charming. Her house, it looked like something out of a magazine: white marble floors, fresh flowers, everything in its perfect place. When I stepped through the gate, I saw them all gathered around the patio table. Oilia sat beside Patricia, their heads close together, sharing a private joke. My son-in-law, David, was at the grill, looking every bit the devoted son Patricia had raised him to be. "Colleen," Patricia called out, her smile so practiced it looked like she was reading from a script. "So glad you could make it." Oilia barely looked up. "Hi, Mum. You can sit over there." She gestured to the far end of the table, away from the conversation. I sat down, my heart sinking a little. I had become the outsider in my own family. The conversation flowed around me, but it wasn't for me. Everyone laughed and talked about things. I wasn't part of Patricia's friends. David's sister with her kids, even the neighbours seemed to fit in better than I did. Then came the gift exchange. "Oh, Patricia, we have something special for you," Oilia announced, standing up with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. David appeared beside her, carrying a small velvet box and an envelope. Patricia's eyes lit up when she opened the box. Inside was a stunning diamond ring, the kind that catches the light from across the room. "Oilia, honey, this is too much," Patricia gasped. But Oilia just beamed. "It's not too much for the woman who raised such an incredible son." Oilia hugged Patricia tightly, and there was more. The envelope contained cruise tickets, 2 weeks in the Mediterranean, first-class accommodations. Patricia's eyes welled up with tears. The table erupted in applause, and Oilia stood there, beaming with pride. And then came my turn. David cleared his throat. "And now, for Grandma Colleen," he said. Though his voice lacked any enthusiasm, Oilia walked over to me, carrying a small gift bag. Inside was a plastic flower, the kind you'd find at a dollar store, and a card that looked like it had been picked up at the last minute. I opened the card. The printed message said, "Happy Mother's Day." And underneath, Oilia had scribbled, "Thanks for everything, Mum." The message was as cold as the flower itself, nothing personal, nothing meaningful. It felt like I was nothing more than a service provider, someone who could be relied on for the hard work, but never truly valued. The table went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to react. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Even David seemed embarrassed. "It's lovely," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Thank you, dear." But Oilia had already turned back to Patricia, talking animatedly about their cruise destinations. She was already lost in the conversation, completely ignoring me. I sat there, holding that cheap plastic flower, feeling smaller than I ever had before. I stayed for another hour, watching my daughter shower all her attention on a woman she'd known for just 12 years while I was left to feel like an afterthought. When I finally stood to leave, Oilia barely looked up. "Thanks for coming. Mum, drive safe." The drive home was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that ring, the tickets, the joy on Oilia's face when she gave them to Patricia. When was the last time she'd looked at me like that? When had she ever given me something with thought and love behind it? I pulled into my driveway, sat in the car for a long time, staring at that ridiculous plastic flower. 43 years of being her mother, and this is what I was worth, a last-minute afterthought from the clearance aisle. The next few days after Mother's Day were filled with a lingering sadness that clung to me like a heavy fog. I couldn't shake the thought of that plastic flower. It wasn't just the cheapness of the gift that hurt, it was the fact that, after everything I had given her, everything I had sacrificed for her, this was all I got in return. It felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that after all these years, I had somehow failed to matter. I tried not to dwell on it. I told myself I was being too sensitive, that I was just overreacting, but deep down, I knew better. I had spent the past 43 years bending over backward for Oilia, pouring my love, time, and resources into her life, and yet it felt like nothing had ever been enough. I spent the next few days going through old photo albums. It wasn't a planned walk down memory lane, but I found myself sifting through pictures of Oilia's childhood, of the years when she looked at me with such trust, such admiration. When she was little, I was her hero. I was the one who made everything better, who solved every problem, who was there to catch her when she fell. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being her hero. Somewhere along the line, I became her ATM. I thought back to the years I had spent building my business, putting in long hours to make Hartwell Consulting the success it was today. It wasn't easy. Harold had always been the dreamer in our family, while I was the practical one. When we started the business together, it was with the hope that we would make a name for ourselves. But his sudden death had changed everything. I became the one who had to carry the load, to keep the business afloat. But I didn't mind. I loved what I did. It gave me purpose, something to focus on. What I didn't realize at the time was how much of my success I had been quietly funneling into Oilia's life, and how much she had come to expect it. There was the tuition for college, $47,000, everything from books to parking tickets. I'd paid for it all without hesitation. When she got married, I paid for the entire wedding, $58,000 for one day, the dress, the catering, the photographer, the venue, all of it. I'd insisted on paying for everything because I wanted her day to be perfect. I wanted her to have everything she'd dreamed of. And when she and David bought their house, I co-signed the mortgage. I remember Harold teasing me about my tendency to hold on to old receipts, to keep track of every penny. He would joke that I was a pack rat, but I didn't mind. I told him it was good to keep everything just in case. And now, as I sat there looking through those receipts, I realized how right I had been to keep them. There were the car loans, too. 3 different vehicles over the years, all co-signed by me. Every time David's landscaping business hit a rough patch, I quietly absorbed the payments into my monthly expenses. No questions asked. And then there was the $85,000 I'd transferred to them in 2019 when David's business nearly went under. No contracts, No repayment plans, just a mother doing what she thought was right. I didn't expect a thank you. I didn't need one. But somewhere along the way, my generosity had become invisible. Oilia had stopped seeing it as love, as sacrifice. To her, it was just an entitlement, a given. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text conversations from the past year. They were functional, practical, but cold. Can you pick up the dry cleaning? David needs to borrow your truck. The kids need school supplies. There were no, how are you, mum, or thinking of you. No genuine check-ins. No, I love you. But Patricia. Patricia got the diamond ring. Patricia got the cruise. Patricia got everything I never received from my own daughter. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just being ignored, I was being used. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. My mind raced as I started pulling documents out of drawers. Tuition payments, wedding receipts, mortgage papers, car loans. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I needed something. I needed to understand what had happened to me. What had I built all this for? What had I sacrificed for? As I worked my way through the piles of paperwork, I realized the extent of it. Over the past 15 years, I had given or spent nearly $400,000 on Oilia and David, college, wedding, house, cars, business bailouts, all of it. $400,000. More money than most people see in their entire lives, and all I had to show for it was a plastic flower and a card that said, "Thanks for everything." The realization hit me hard. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was the fact that all my sacrifices, all my efforts had been taken for granted. Oilia and David didn't see me as a mother, as a person. They saw me as a resource. I closed the folder in front of me with a snap. I couldn't look at it anymore. I had given them everything, and they had given me nothing in return. Nothing but manipulation, demands, and an ever-growing list of obligations. I had spent my whole life trying to buy their love, and all I had done was teach them to expect it. I got up and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the houses across the way. I thought about the future. I thought about what would happen if I stopped supporting them, if I stopped being the one who always gave. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of calm, but it was quickly overshadowed by a creeping sense of unease. I had spent the night contemplating my next move, replaying everything that had led me here. Oilia's cold disregard, David's dependence on my financial support, and my own role in all of it. I could no longer deny it. I had been enabling them. I had allowed myself to become their safety net, their bank, the person they could always rely on without ever truly being seen as a mother, as a person deserving of love and respect. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight of the years I had spent in this cycle. I had built a successful business. I had made sacrifices for them. I had given everything, yet none of it seemed to matter. All of my hard work, all the money, all the love, none of it was enough to make them appreciate me, to make them care for me the way they cared for others. I went into my office and sat down at my desk, staring at the piles of paperwork. My mind kept drifting back to the image of that stupid plastic flower. It symbolized everything I had become in their eyes, something disposable, something that could be replaced with the slightest inconvenience. I ran my fingers over the papers, each one a reminder of my contributions, my sacrifices, and how little they had meant. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, but this time it wasn't directed at them. It was directed at myself. How had I allowed this to happen? How had I let them manipulate me for so long? I had spent my life taking care of everyone else, but who had taken care of me? Who had ever asked what I needed? I thought about the money I had given them, the $400,000, all of it spent to keep them comfortable, to give them opportunities, and now I realized that none of it had been given freely. It was all done with the hope, no, the expectation that they would someday see me as more than just the woman who signed the checks. But they never did. They never appreciated the sacrifices I had made, the hours I had worked, the things I had given up. I thought about the gifts I had given them over the years, everything from college tuition to wedding costs to helping them buy their house. And yet, every time I gave, it was never enough. They just took and took, without ever once stopping to ask how I was feeling, how I was doing. And the worst part, I had let them take everything from me without ever asking for anything in return. I had built my business, worked tirelessly to make it a success, but I had done it all with the hope that one day Oilia and David would appreciate me for who I was, not just for what I could provide. I got up and walked over to the window. The sky was overcast, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. I looked out at the empty street, the quiet neighbourhood, and wondered how I had gotten to this point. How had I allowed my life to be reduced to nothing more than a series of transactions? Where had I gone wrong? I thought about the conversations I had had with Margaret, my attorney. I had told her that I was considering selling the business, but now, as I stood there, I realised I wasn't just thinking about selling it. I was thinking about taking control of my life again. I was thinking about stepping away from the role I had played for so long, being their caretaker, their provider, their emotional support. I wanted to see what my life would look like if I didn't have to worry about them anymore, if I didn't have to wake up every day wondering how I was going to fix their problems. I didn't know if selling the business was the answer, but I knew one thing for sure: I needed change. I needed to stop being a crutch for them. I needed to see if they could stand on their own 2 feet without me. I walked back to my desk and picked up my phone. I stared at it for a long time before I finally decided to make the call. It was time to take control. "Margaret," I said when she answered, "I want to move forward with the sale of Hartwell Consulting." There was a brief pause before Margaret responded, her voice calm but cautious. "Are you sure, Colleen? This is a big decision. Once you start the process, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. "It's time for me to let go." I hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I was making a decision for myself. I wasn't doing it for Oilia, for David, or for anyone else. I was doing it because it was what I needed. I was taking back control of my life. That night, as I sat in my living room, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The phone had stopped ringing, the texts had stopped coming. I was no longer a part of their drama, their demands, their manipulation, and for the first time in years, I felt free. But even in that moment of peace, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. I had made my decision, but I still had to face the consequences. I still had to face Oilia, and I didn't know what that would look like. The next few days were filled with an eerie quiet. My phone, which had been ringing incessantly for weeks, now sat silent on my desk. I hadn't realised just how much of my life had been consumed by those calls, those constant demands for help. No one was asking how I was doing anymore. No one was checking in on me. The silence was deafening, but at least it was peaceful. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. I spent those quiet days going through the rest of the documents, the financial statements, the business contracts, the receipts for Oilia's tuition, and the wedding expenses. I couldn't stop looking at the numbers. How had I gotten to this point? Why had I spent so much of my life helping them, giving them everything they needed, without ever expecting anything in return? I found myself rereading the papers over and over again, searching for some kind of sign, some hint of a mistake. Maybe I'd made an error. Maybe I'd missed something. Anything to explain why I had become the person who was taken for granted. But there was no mistake. I had given them everything. My time, my money, my love, everything I had. When I looked back, I saw the pattern of giving without question, of sacrificing my own needs for the sake of others. I had done it for years, but now I wondered why. Was it love? Was it guilt? Or was it something else, something deeper? I thought about my relationship with Harold, my late husband. We had built this life together, this business, this family. But when he died, I was left alone, holding everything together. I had been the strong one, the one who kept things running, who made the tough decisions. I had never asked for help, never let anyone in. Maybe that's where it all started. Maybe I had been so determined to hold everything together that I had forgotten to ask for what I needed. As I sifted through more documents, I came across a folder marked Harold's Life Insurance. I hesitated before opening it. It had been years since I had looked at it. When Harold passed, I had taken care of everything: his funeral, the insurance claims, the paperwork. It had been a whirlwind of tasks, but I had done it. I had made sure everything was in order, just like I always did. But as I opened the folder, something caught my eye, a note that Harold had written before he passed. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple note tucked into a file with his signature at the bottom. "Colleen," the note began. "I know I'm not always good at showing it, but I appreciate everything you've done for me, for the business, for our family. I'm sorry I didn't always make time for you. I hope you know that I love you." I stared at the note for a long time, my eyes welling up. Harold had never been great with words, but in that simple note, he had said everything I needed to hear. He had acknowledged my sacrifices, my hard work, my dedication to our family. And yet, it was too late. I couldn't go back and fix the things that had been left unsaid while he was alive. Tears fell silently down my face as I sat there, holding that note. I had spent so many years trying to be everything to everyone, but in doing so, I had lost sight of what mattered most: taking care of myself, valuing my own needs, and finding love that wasn't transactional. I closed the folder and set it aside, feeling a deep sadness wash over me. But this time, the sadness didn't feel like despair. It felt like acceptance. I had done everything I could. I had given them everything. And now, it was time for me to take a step back and figure out what I needed, what I wanted. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the window, staring out at the view of the street below. It was a calm evening, the sky painted in shades of pink and purple as the sun began to set. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't going to fix their problems anymore. I wasn't going to keep carrying the weight of their mistakes, their bad decisions, their financial struggles. They were adults, capable of standing on their own. It was time for me to let go. But even as I made that decision, I knew the hardest part was still to come. I had to face Oilia. I had to face the reality of what I was doing, the impact it would have on her, on David, and on our family. I had no idea how she would react, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding behind the facade of a mother who was always there, always ready to help. I had to let her face the consequences of her own actions. And so, I made a plan. I wasn't going to do it all at once. I was going to start small, make changes that would slowly shift the dynamic between us. I was going to stop enabling them, stop giving them what they expected without ever asking for anything in return. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way forward. I glanced at my phone. There were no messages, no calls. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. The silence didn't feel so lonely anymore, it felt like freedom. The weeks that followed were filled with subtle but deliberate changes. I found myself growing more comfortable in my newfound independence. But the tension that had always existed between me and Oilia continued to gnaw at me. I knew that I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. I had to tell her. I had to show her the consequences of her actions and force her to understand what I had done. One morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. The decision to sell Hartwell Consulting had been made, and it felt like the right move. I had been carrying the weight of everyone's problems for far too long, and now it was time to free myself. The truth was, I didn't need the business anymore. It had been my life's work, but it had also become a crutch, a way for me to stay tied to people who didn't appreciate me. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, the sunlight filtering through the blinds. My mind raced as I thought about the future, my future. I had spent so much time worrying about everyone else, making sure their lives were comfortable, that I had neglected to ask myself what I wanted. I had lost myself in their needs, their demands, and their expectations. But not anymore. I spent the morning drafting an email to my attorney, confirming my decision to proceed with the sale. I included a note about the confidentiality I needed, as I didn't want anyone to know about my plans until everything was finalized. Once I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. There was no turning back now. That afternoon, I received a call from David. His voice, as usual, was filled with a mix of frustration and urgency. "Colleen, I heard through the grapevine that you might be selling the business," he said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk about this." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers curling around the edge of the desk. I had been expecting this. They weren't going to just let go without a fight. People gossip. "David," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "If I decide to sell, I'll make sure you and Oilia are informed, but I don't owe you an explanation until everything is finalized." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again, his voice a little more measured. "Colleen, this isn't just about you," he said. "We have contracts tied to your business. Oilia's income comes from your referrals. If you sell, it's going to affect all of us. It's going to affect me. Don't do something we'll all regret." I could hear the desperation in his voice, and it made me realize just how deep their dependence on me ran. For years, I had been the one holding everything together, paying for their house, covering their business expenses, supporting Oilia's career, and now it was all crumbling because I was finally taking control of my own life. "I've done enough for both of you," I said, my voice steady. "It's time for you to figure things out on your own. You've had more than enough time to become self-sufficient. I'm not going to keep enabling you." There was silence on the other end of the line before David spoke again, this time with an edge of anger. "Fine, but don't think you're going to get away with this, Colleen. You'll regret it." I hung up the phone without responding. I didn't need to listen to any more of his threats. For the first time in years, I felt empowered. I was finally standing up for myself, for my own needs, and not letting them manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to be their punching bag, their financial safety net, any longer. Later that afternoon, Oilia called. Her voice was tense, laced with concern. "Mum, I heard about the business," she said, trying to sound calm but failing. "Are you really going through with this? What about the house? What about everything you've built? You can't just throw it all away." I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, trying to maintain my composure. It was time to confront her. It was time for her to understand the truth, even if it hurt. "Oilia, I've spent the last 15 years giving everything to you and David. I've paid for your college, your wedding, your house, your cars, and your business bailouts. I've been your safety net, your ATM, and all I've ever asked for in return is respect. But I haven't received that. I've been invisible to you, nothing more than a tool to help you live your life. And I'm done. I'm done being used. I'm done being the one who carries the weight of your mistakes. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Oilia spoke again. Her voice quieter now. I didn't mean to take you for granted. Mum, she said softly, I just didn't know how much you were doing for us. I thought it was normal. I thought you were okay with it. I could feel the tears threatening to spill as I listened to her, but I didn't let them fall. This wasn't about pity. This was about clarity. This was about setting boundaries. No, Oilia. It wasn't normal. It was never normal. I've been giving, and you've been taking without ever once asking what I need, and I can't do it anymore. I've spent my entire life giving to everyone else, and now it's time for me to take care of myself. There was a heavy silence before she spoke again, this time with a hint of desperation. Mum, please, don't do this. You can't just cut us off. We need you. I need you. I closed my eyes and swallowed the lump in my throat. I need you to learn how to live without me, Oilia, I said softly. I need you to see me for who I am, not just what I can do for you. You're grown now. It's time for you to take responsibility for your own life. I'm not going to keep enabling you. She didn't respond right away. Instead, I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line, processing what I had just said. I'm sorry, Mum, she finally whispered. I really am. I never meant for it to be like this. I know you didn't, I replied, my voice gentle now. But it doesn't change anything. I need to live for me now. And so do you. We both sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation settling between us. It wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but it was a start. Maybe this was the moment things would finally change. The next few days felt like a strange kind of limbo. The decision had been made, but the aftermath was far from over. Oilia had stopped calling me as frequently, though there were still a few messages, mostly apologetic, pleading with me to reconsider. Part of me felt a small pang of guilt, but I quickly reminded myself that this was what I needed for too long. I had allowed myself to be a stepping stone for everyone else's success, while I remained stuck in a cycle of emotional and financial dependency. But then, on a Thursday afternoon, I got the call I knew was coming. Oilia. Mum, we need to talk, she said, her voice sounding exhausted, as if the weight of our last conversation had been too much for her to bear. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. I had made up my mind, and there was no turning back. I'm listening, I said, sitting down at the kitchen table, the soft morning sunlight streaming in through the windows. I wanted to feel calm, collected, but inside my heart was racing. Mum, please, I know I messed up. I know I've taken you for granted. I should have seen everything you've done for me, and I'm sorry. But selling the business, I don't think you realise what this means for all of us. David and I, we're so dependent on you. We wouldn't have made it without your help, without the life you built for us. You've given us everything, and now it feels like you're taking it all away. It's like you're giving up on us. Her voice broke on the last part, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. I'm not giving up on you, I replied, my voice softer than I had intended. I'm giving you the opportunity to stand on your own, to live without relying on me. I've spent so many years being the one to bail you out, to make sure you never have to face any real consequences. But that ends now. Oilia, you're an adult, and it's time for you to take responsibility for your own life, for your own future. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could feel her processing what I had said. I could feel the emotional weight of this moment, the pain that had built up between us. "Do you even care about me anymore?" "Mum," Oilia's voice trembled. "Do you still love me?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I sat back in my chair, the weight of it sinking into my chest. "I do love you, Oilia, but love isn't about constantly giving and never receiving anything in return. Love is about respect. It's about understanding that relationships aren't one-sided. For years, I've been there for you, and I've never once asked for anything in return. And now, I'm asking for something my own peace of mind, my own life." I paused, trying to steady my voice, trying to put into words the years of hurt that had built up inside me. I need to live for me now. I need to stop being the person who always fixes everything. I've given enough. Oilia, now it's your turn. She didn't respond right away, and I knew she was trying to process what I had said. I wasn't sure if she understood yet, but I hoped, in time, she would. "I'm not going to stop loving you," I continued, my voice soft but firm. "But I can't keep living this way. I need to find myself again. I need to stop being the person who gets walked all over." "I understand, Mum," Oilia said finally, though her voice was thick with emotion. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I promise I'll do better. I'll work harder. I'll find my own way." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. We had been down this road before, and I wasn't sure how much had really changed. "I'm not asking for you to fix everything, Oilia," I said. "I'm asking for you to take responsibility for your own life. I'm asking for you to see me for who I am, not just for what I can do for you. I've been carrying everyone's burden for too long, and I can't do it anymore." There was another long pause. "I get it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll figure it out, Mum. I promise." "Good," I said, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "That's all I want, for you to figure it out, for both of us to figure it out." The call ended shortly after that, and I sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of the conversation settle over me. I didn't know if this was the turning point for us, but I hoped it was. I hoped Oilia would finally understand that love, real love, isn't about taking, it's about giving and receiving in equal measure. I thought about what came next for me. Selling the business was still a reality I was moving toward, but I wasn't sure what my life would look like afterward. Would I be lonely? Would I regret the decision? These were the questions that lingered, but I had to believe that this was the right path. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. I was taking control of my own future, no matter how uncertain it felt. As the sun began to set that evening, I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt strangely empowering. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally living my own life. As the days passed, the weight of my decision began to sink in. I had made it clear to Oilia, and now there was no going back. The silence between us grew heavier, but somehow it felt more bearable. The constant stream of messages and calls stopped. I wasn't sure if that was because Oilia was respecting my wishes or because she had started to understand the reality of what I was doing. Regardless, the quiet allowed me to focus on what I needed to do next. I spent my days preparing for the sale of the business. It wasn't easy. Every meeting with Margaret, every phone call with potential buyers, was a reminder of how much I was letting go. Hartwell Consulting had been my life's work, my legacy, but it was also a weight, a burden I had carried for far too long. I needed to let it go to find the freedom I was so desperately searching for. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing the final details of the sale, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Oilia. "I miss you. Mum, I know this is hard, but please, let's talk. I stared at the screen for a long time. The message was simple, but it carried a weight that I wasn't ready to carry. I had already made my decision. I had already told her everything I needed to say. And yet, a small part of me hesitated. Was I doing the right thing? Was this really the end of everything? I debated for a few minutes, but then I turned the phone off and set it down on my desk. I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. I wasn't going to let myself be swayed by guilt or emotion. This was something I had to do for me, and if Oilia didn't understand that yet, it was no longer my problem. The next day, I met with Margaret again. The buyer had made an offer, and it was a good one. The paperwork was almost finalised. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me, but there was a strange sense of clarity that came with it. I was about to take control of my life again, and nothing was going to stand in my way. But as I walked out of the meeting, I received another call. This time, it was from David. "Colleen," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "We need to talk. This isn't just about the business, about the contracts. It's about Oilia. She's falling apart. She's barely eating, barely sleeping. She's not herself. And I'm worried. This is tearing her apart." I listened in silence as he continued, his words a mixture of anger and desperation, but underneath it all, I could hear the same old manipulation, the same old tactics. "David," I said calmly, my voice firm, "I understand you're worried, but you need to understand that I'm not responsible for Oilia's life anymore. She's an adult, and she needs to learn how to stand on her own. I've done everything I can for her, and it hasn't been enough. She needs to figure things out, just like you do." David fell silent, and I could hear him sigh heavily on the other end of the line. "You're being cruel, Colleen," he said after a long pause. "You're throwing everything away. I never asked for your money, your help. We didn't ask for any of this. We just need you." The words hung in the air, but I wasn't moved. "You don't need me, David. You need to stand up and take responsibility. I'm not going to be the one to carry you anymore. You need to make your own decisions, without relying on me." The conversation ended quickly after that. I could hear the anger in his voice, but it didn't affect me the way it once did. I had finally reached my breaking point, and I was no longer afraid to stand up for myself. As the days wore on, I continued to prepare for the sale, but something inside me felt different. I wasn't just letting go of the business. I was letting go of the people who had always relied on me, who had always taken me for granted. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had spent my whole life trying to be everything to everyone else. Now, it was time to be something for myself. A week later, I sat down to sign the final documents. The sale was official. My life was changing in ways I couldn't fully grasp. But there was a part of me that felt lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied down by anyone else's needs. I was finally living for me. The phone rang just as I finished signing the papers. It was Oilia. I hesitated for a moment, but then I answered. "Mum," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath. It was time for her to understand that I wasn't going to bend anymore. Time for her to face the reality of what had happened. "I've already told you everything I needed to. Oilia," I said calmly, "I've made my decision, and I'm not changing it. You have to understand that I'm doing this for both of us. You need to learn how to live without me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could feel her struggling to find the right words. "I understand," she whispered finally. "I don't know what to say, but I understand. I just want to say that I'm sorry for everything. I've taken you for granted. I've made you feel like a resource, not a mother, and I don't know how to fix that. But I will try. Her words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't let myself soften. I had to stay firm. I don't expect you to fix anything. Oilia, I just want you to understand that I'm not your ATM, your safety net anymore. I'm your mother, and I deserve to be treated like one. She didn't respond right away, and I could hear her breathing heavily as she processed what I had said. I'll figure it out, Mum, she said finally. I promise. I'll find my own way. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to grow. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me. You're welcome, Oilia. Now go and make something of yourself. The call ended, and I sat there for a while, letting the weight of everything settle over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I was finally in control of my own life. And for the first time in years, I was okay with that. The weeks after the sale of Hartwell Consulting passed by in a blur. My life had shifted, and I was no longer the woman who sacrificed her peace and identity for others. I had finally begun to carve out time for myself, taking walks by the lake, reading books that had sat untouched for years, and even starting a pottery class in town. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living for myself. But there was still one thing I had to face, Oilia. Despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unresolved. It had been weeks since our last conversation, but I could sense the emotional distance still hanging between us. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I had spent a lifetime trying to fix everything for her, but now I had to step back and let her face the consequences of her actions. It was late one evening when the doorbell rang, interrupting my quiet evening of reading. My heart skipped a beat as I walked to the door. I already knew who it was before I even opened it. Oilia stood on my doorstep, her face pale, eyes swollen from what looked like days of crying. Behind her, David hovered, looking equally uncomfortable. I opened the door slowly, taking a deep breath. I had to be calm. I had to stay strong. This was the moment, Mum. We need to talk, Oilia said, her voice thick with emotion. Please, it's important. I stepped aside to let them in, but I didn't invite them to sit down. This wasn't a conversation about small talk or apologies. This was about finally laying everything on the table. I crossed my arms, standing tall. I'm listening, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. Oilia sat down on the edge of the couch, David following suit. Though he seemed hesitant, she looked at him, then back at me. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what you said, sure, about the business, about the way I've treated you over the years. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Part of me wanted to jump in and offer reassurance, but I knew better. This had to be her moment. She needed to speak for herself, not rely on me to fill the gaps. I know I've been selfish, she continued, her voice cracking slightly. I know I've taken you for granted, and I've been trying to figure out why I've done this, why I've made you feel invisible. David spoke up before I could respond, his voice tinged with frustration. Look, Colleen, this isn't easy for us. We're both struggling right now. Oilia's been having a hard time with everything. The house, the business, the kids. It's all too much. And we need your help, okay? We can't do this without you. I stood there, listening to David's words, but I couldn't help but feel the familiar pang of resentment, the same old manipulation, the same old guilt-tripping. It was like nothing had changed. He was still trying to use me as their lifeline. No, David, I said firmly, interrupting him. You can't keep relying on me. I've been carrying both of you for far too long, and I've given everything I have. I've spent my life trying to fix things for you, but you've never once stopped to ask what I needed. I'm done being your safety net. David opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, silencing him. I had said what I needed to say to him already. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about Oilia. I turned back to her, my gaze steady. Oilia, this isn't just about the business, or the house, or the money. This is about respect. This is about me finally saying, enough. I've given you everything I had to give, and you've never once appreciated it. I was never your ATM, I was never your maid, and I was never just here to fix things for you. I'm your mother, and I deserve to be treated with love and respect. Oilia's face flushed with shame. I know, Mum, I know I've failed you, but I don't know how to fix this. I've been so used to you doing everything, I didn't realise how much it was hurting you. I was blind to it. I never stopped to see how much you were sacrificing. I've taken you for granted, and I'm so sorry. I softened, just slightly, though the pain in my chest didn't go away. I understand you didn't mean to hurt me, but that doesn't change what's happened. You've relied on me for so long that you've forgotten what it means to stand on your own. I've given you everything, but I've never asked for anything in return. That stops now. I could see the tears forming in Oilia's eyes, and for a moment, I wondered if she was finally starting to understand. But I couldn't let myself get lost in her sorrow. I needed to keep my boundaries firm. I'm selling the business, Oilia, and I'm not doing it to punish you. I'm doing it to free myself. I can't keep being the person who holds everything together for everyone else. I have to live my life, and so do you. The silence stretched on, heavy with all the unspoken words between us. Finally, Oilia spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. Are you ever going to forgive me? Mum. I looked at her, my heart aching. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that I would forgive her, that everything would go back to the way it was. But I knew that wasn't the truth. Forgiveness wasn't something I could just give. It had to be earned. I don't know. Oilia, I said softly, the words coming out slower than I wanted them to. I don't know if I can forgive you, but that's something you're going to have to work for. It's not something I can just give you. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't try to hide them. She didn't say anything else. She just sat there, staring at me with a look that was part sorrow, part fear, and part something else I couldn't quite name. David stood up, pulling Oilia to her feet. We'll figure this out, Colleen, he said, his voice softer now. But please, think about it. Think about what you're doing. I didn't answer him. I simply nodded, and they left. I watched them walk down the driveway, Oilia's face still streaked with tears. I closed the door slowly, standing there for a moment, letting the silence return. This wasn't the end of our story. I knew that, but it was a turning point, a moment where things had finally shifted. I didn't know what would happen between us in the future, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life. And that, for me, was enough. The finalisation of the sale took longer than I had expected, but I wasn't in a rush. The first few days after the meeting with Oilia and David were filled with a strange kind of peace. I knew they were angry, hurt, confused, but I also knew that this was the only way forward. If I didn't make this move now, I would only continue to enable their dependency, and I was done with that. I spent the next few days handling the last bits of business, reviewing documents, answering a few final questions from the buyer's lawyer, and preparing for the moment when the business would officially be out of my hands. It was surreal to think about. After so many years of pouring my soul into the company, it was becoming someone else's. I didn't feel regret. Not exactly, but I couldn't deny that there was a weight in my chest, an emotional heaviness I couldn't shake. Hartwell Consulting had been my life, my purpose. It had given me structure after Harold's death, a reason to wake up every morning. I had worked hard to make it what it was, and now I was letting it go. But the more I thought about it, the more I realised I wasn't just letting go of the business. I was letting go of the life I had been living, the life where I was always the one fixing things, always the one giving, always the one who everyone could depend on. That life was over. As I signed the final documents that morning, there was a bittersweet satisfaction in knowing that I was free from the weight I had carried for so long. There was no turning back now, but for the first time in years, I felt light. The paperwork was signed, the funds were transferred, and I walked out of my office for the last time, knowing it would be the last time I ever stepped foot in that building. I had spent 3 decades building Hartwell Consulting, but now it was someone else's responsibility. The sale was official. It didn't take long for word to spread. The next day, I got on a call from a reporter asking for a comment on the sale. Apparently, my business had made quite an impression in the local news. They wanted to know why I had sold the business, what I planned to do next, and what advice I had for other women who had built successful businesses. I could have given them the typical response about new opportunities, personal growth, and exciting changes, but instead, I said something different. I'm done being the one who holds everything together. I said, it's time for me to live for myself. I've spent my whole life giving, and now it's my turn to find peace, to figure out who I am without the title of business owner, without being the one who fixes everyone else's problems. It felt like a weight had been lifted from me, just saying those words aloud. For so many years, I had felt like I had to be everything for everyone, but now I was choosing to be something for myself. The reporter seemed taken aback by my response, but they thanked me for my honesty and ended the call. I didn't care what they thought. I wasn't doing this for the headlines. I was doing it for me. That night, as I sat in my quiet living room, sipping a glass of wine, I realized something. I had built a life that was based on giving my time, my energy, my money, my love to everyone around me. But in doing so, I had lost sight of myself. The business was just one part of that, but now, with it gone, I had the opportunity to rebuild, not my career, not my reputation, but myself. For the first time in a long time, I had space to breathe and time to reflect. I had no idea what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever find a new purpose, or if I would just enjoy this newfound freedom for a while. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life living for others. I was going to live for me. The phone rang again, and for a moment, I debated whether or not to answer. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I picked it up anyway. "Hello," I said, feeling the strange sensation of not knowing who was on the other end of the line. "Colleen," it was Oilia's voice, and for a moment, I thought I had misheard. "Mom, it's me." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I kept my voice steady. "What is it?" "Oilia." I just wanted to say thank you," she said quietly. "For everything you've done. I've been thinking a lot, and I realise now how much you've given, how much you've sacrificed. I never understood it until now. I've taken you for granted, and I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just want you to know that I see you. I see what you did, and I understand Neptune now." Her words stung, but in a way, they also soothed me. I hadn't expected an apology. I hadn't expected anything, but hearing her say it, hearing her finally take responsibility for her actions was a small victory. "I appreciate that, Oilia," I said softly, the tightness in my chest loosening slightly. "But I don't need you to apologize. I need you to understand. I need you to learn to stand on your own, without depending on me." There was a long pause, and I could hear her sniffling on the other end of the line. "I will. Mum," she said, her voice breaking. "I promise. I'll do better. I'll learn to take care of myself, and I'll never take you for granted again." I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know if Oilia would keep her word, if she would change. but for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. "Good," I replied quietly. "I'm glad to hear it." We hung up shortly after that, and I sat there in the silence of my living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had let go of the business. I had let go of the need to be everything to everyone. I had finally started to live for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The days stretched into weeks, and the peaceful silence I had been craving settled over me. I had made the choice to sell Hartwell Consulting, to stop being the one who always held everything together. There were moments when I felt a quiet sense of loss, especially when I thought of the legacy I was leaving behind. But that feeling was fleeting, overtaken by the clarity and the newfound freedom I was experiencing. Each morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside my window, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was a stark contrast to the constant hum of emails, phone calls, and meetings that had once dominated my life. Now, the world seemed quieter, slower, and for the first time in years, I felt as though I had the space to breathe. I continued my routine of walks by the lake, pottery classes in the evenings, and reading books I had been too busy to touch. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was the first time I had ever taken the time to focus on myself and what I wanted, rather than what others needed. But even in this new life, I wasn't without reminders of the past. I started receiving texts from Oilia. Though they had slowed down after our last conversation, she seemed to be respecting the boundaries I had set, though I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt each time her name appeared on the screen. She had apologized, and I had accepted her apology, but I knew the road ahead would not be an easy one. It would take time for both of us to heal, and even longer to rebuild trust. One afternoon, I decided to visit the cottage's small garden that had been left untouched. I had never been one for gardening before, too busy with work, but now, as I knelt on the grass, tending to the small flowers, I felt a sense of satisfaction. There was something cathartic about watching something grow, about giving it the care and attention it needed. It was a reminder that things, even relationships, could grow and change with the right amount of care. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch, a text came through from Margaret, my attorney. "Colleen, just wanted to update you. I've been in contact with a few people who are interested in purchasing the commercial properties. We have a few strong offers, and I'll keep you posted as soon as things move forward." The message was professional and to the point, but as I read it, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The business was gone, the properties would soon follow, and with them, the life I had known for so many years would be nothing but a memory. It wasn't just the financial aspects I was leaving behind, it was the identity I had built. I had always been Colleen Hartwell, the businesswoman, the one everyone turned to for answers, the one who could fix anything. But now, as I looked around the cottage at the simple, quiet space I had made for myself, I realized that I didn't need to be that person anymore. I didn't need to be the one who fixed everything for everyone. I had spent my life doing that. And where had it gotten me? Alone in a house full of achievements and regrets, holding on to relationships that had drained me. It wasn't an easy realization. I had spent decades living for others, but now I had the chance to live for myself. As I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't the peace that comes from avoiding conflict or pretending things are okay. No, this peace was earned. It came from choosing to finally stand up for myself, to let go of the weight I had been carrying for so long, and to finally take control of my own life. The phone rang again. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether or not to answer, but then I glanced at the screen. It was Oilia. I took a deep breath and answered the call. "Mum," she said quietly, her voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking about everything you said, about the business, about what you've done for us, and how we've taken it all for granted. I'm sorry, I really am. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I wanted to say that I understand now. I've been so caught up in my own world. I never stopped to see how much you were giving up for me, and I'm sorry." I felt a lump in my throat as I listened to her, but I didn't let myself cry. Not yet. I had to stay firm in my decision. "I'm glad you're starting to understand, Oilia," I said softly, "but you have to understand that this isn't just about the business or the money. This is about respect, about realizing that I'm not just a resource. I'm your mother." She was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "I know. I've been so focused on what I needed. I didn't stop to see what you needed. I just wanted you to know that I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on myself, and I'm going to make sure I'm not relying on you anymore. I can't ask for everything and never give anything in return." I felt a quiet pride for her, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't quite resolved. I wasn't sure if she could really change, but for the first time, I believed she was starting to understand. "I hope you do, Oilia," I said gently. "I hope you find your way, but know this, I won't always be here to fix things. I've given enough. Now, it's your turn." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I love you, Mum, and I'm going to work on showing you that, not just saying it." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in her words. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "I love you too," I said softly. "But remember, love isn't about what you can take. It's about what you can give." The call ended, and I sat there for a while, letting the silence return. It was a strange kind of peace, one that came from letting go, from choosing to live for myself, even if it meant stepping away from the people I had spent so long trying to please. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in soft shadows, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The journey wasn't over, but it was mine now, and for the first time in years, I was ready to take it on.